The Indianapolis Colts have plenty of promise heading into the 2025 season, but anything can happen in the NFL. So, what kind of nightmare scenarios might play out for Indianapolis, and which ones do you, the fans, want to see this team sidestep and completely avoid? Well, let's talk about it. Welcome to the Horseshoe Huddle Podcast, as always, presented by Indianapolis Colts on SI.com. I'm Drake Wally, deputy editor for the site, a co-deputy editor for the site, and co-host of this podcast. And of course, we're joined by Noah Gebert, analyst for the site, fellow co-host of the podcast. Noah, first off, wanted to tell the fans thank you for dealing with me getting late. Saw my daughter got home a little too late, so thank you for hanging in there with us. But, you know, ahead of training camp, we have, goodness, I'm looking here. It's like probably 5 or 6 days before training camp. But you have to account for potential fall off scenarios or, just the worst possible thing that could happen. How are you doing, man? How do you feel about this team ahead of training camp? And, this is a squad that, especially at the quarterback position, you could realistically see some really rough things happen.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions that need to be answered before we head into training camp or as we go into training camp. A lot of things that are up in the air, kind of a lot of things that are that sound maybe like they were good plans when we were heading into the offseason, but really you're a play or two away from some positions looking really rough when it comes to depth. And you're really hoping some of these guys can take the next step and take the team to the next level because, without some progression from some of these young guys and without a really healthy preseason heading into the regular season, I think it might become apparent how thin the roster is once you get to the certain depth pieces on different parts of the roster. So yeah, we've got a lot of questions to answer. This isn't the most optimistic episode that we're going to be going over. It's labeled nightmare scenario, so obviously not going to be optimistic. So we're going to be talking about what could go wrong and things that you should be watching out for and kind of things that as fans maybe you're on high alert for as you're going through the season or going through training camp and you're like, oh, this guy's not looking as good. What does that kind of mean for what the defense, what the offense might look like as we go through the season?
Yeah, and like we said, this could really apply to any NFL team. I will say, though, that especially, and we'll get into it, but especially because of such important and critical positions, changes on the roster, adjustments that were made. This is a team that really has I would say a high ceiling, right? But they have a pretty low floor too. There's just so much that can happen. But I Tony Pelletieri, thank you so much. One more day closer to preseason. Preseason football is brutal. It's very, very, unfun to watch. But hey, it's so far, at least for now. Maybe in the future it won't be if they keep adding games. But right now we have to get through it, unfortunately. So, what were you gonna say?
Yeah. Preseason. I'm just excited to watch football, though. Right? Once where we'll get a couple quarters where it's fun, but yeah, other than that, it's going to be kind of rough watching some of these guys go out.
Yeah, and at this point, I think that the preseason, to a degree, it's definitely needed. You got to it's not about the starters; it's about potential fringe starters and guys that are at the end of the roster, really just fighting for a spot. John Gilbert says we're used to nightmare scenarios at this point. Unfortunately, John, that's very accurate. This is a team that has just not been able to really sidestep that kind of stuff. But I'm glad that you brought that up because that's exactly what we're going to dive into tonight. So, Noah, this season, and we're going to say it over and over again, there's jobs on the line here. Okay, there's from the executive positions all the way to the players, all the way to the coaches. I think you can agree with me here that this is probably the last season the Colts could have nightmare scenarios and still look the same the year following.
Yeah, and I think the term nightmare scenarios might differ based on who you're asking within the fan base. I think the true nightmare scenario might be, hey, one and done in the playoffs and Chris Ballard's still here. Maybe that's a nightmare scenario going forward. Even if you get there, maybe you still don't have that quarterback situation figured out and you're going into year 10 with the same regime there at the front office and you're not looking optimistic. So yeah, I'm sure maybe some of these nightmare scenarios that we're going to be bringing up where the results are going to be pretty rough and you're going in with maybe a 5-win season or whatever, maybe that's best case scenario for some fans because that might mean changes actually coming around in Indianapolis.
Yeah, I mean, some fans might be happy about that. I do know that there is that select few every single season. If you're not the Kansas City Chiefs or the Bills or a team that's consistently making the playoffs, pressing for a Super Bowl, there's teams out there that have fans, and the Colts are no exception. Where they're like, "Hey, man, it's tank season,"
Team tank, yeah.
they got a tank. So, but we'll go ahead and dive into it here. We're going to start off with a couple of guys that, I mean, they're probably not talked about enough. It's a duo, and one of them is hardly spoken about it outside of the Colts realm of things, and that's if DeForest Buckner or Grover Stewart or both have
No.
to miss significant time. I love this one here because this is exactly why Indianapolis has chosen not to re-sign Taven Bryan.
Yeah.
This is why they chose to cut ties with Raekwon Smith and then proceed to turn around. You sign a guy in Neville Gallimore who had playoff experience and success last season. And then you decide to draft in the 6th round Tim Smith out of Alabama. I think that right there said we need insurance. They also brought in Eric Johnson, so there's a lot of moves the Colts, Noah, have made to really solidify that depth on the interior in case this does happen.
Yeah, Grover Stewart, DeForest Buckner. I think either way you're looking at it, the people behind them at the 1 tech, the 3 tech, whatever position you end up calling that, there's major questions, right? You had Taven Bryan and Raekwon Davis come in and play for you last year, and they didn't play well, so maybe you think it's a little bit of addition by subtraction because you're removing them, but snaps are snaps, and you need some people to come in and fill in and play those snaps, and right now it's kind of on Neville Gallimore. Adetomiwa Adebawore, you're hoping for that development, but that's not somebody that I personally would feel comfortable playing in a large role there at defensive tackle, at least based off of what we've seen in the first 2 years of his career. And then, Tim Smith, you mentioned in the 6th round, a 6th round rookie, not somebody you want to rely on to play significant snaps. Even in the 53-man roster prediction that we did last week, I had him not making the 53-man roster and having him take up one of those practice squad spots, getting beat out by Eric Johnson, which is also a guy I don't think you want to lean on too much. He's a guy who you cut last season and didn't make your 53 last season. So that's also a guy that I wouldn't feel very comfortable really leaning on in any serious role on the defensive line. Right now, I guess if you're going with Eric Johnson and Tim Smith, both of those guys are really competing for that main backup spot behind Grover Stewart as the backup nose tackle. And Neville Gallimore is just kind of a guy who in his career so far has only played around 300, 400 snaps a season. Both of those are kind of those numbers that Taven Bryan and Raekwon Davis were getting last year. So you're trying to replace 800 snaps with a guy who, 6th round rookie, someone you cut, still a project player in Adetomiwa Adebawore, and then, that 300 snap guy, Neville Gallimore. So I think that there's a lot of projection going on behind those guys, even if Buckner or Stewart don't miss time. And then you add on top of that, those 700, 600 snaps that Buckner and Stewart play, and trying to replace any bit of that if there's an injury or what have you during the season. I think that's just a nightmare.
Yeah, and this is precisely why I really wanted the Colts to, at least within the first 4 rounds, take a defensive tackle.
Yeah.
Is because it's nothing against the Johnson, Smith, Gallimore. It's nothing against their talents, but none of those 3 guys. I mean, one is a rookie, like you said. Another is a guy that's had a very journeyman-like NFL career in Johnson. And then, you're leaning on Neville Gallimore, who's mostly a pass rushing type of interior guy. And what did teams do when Stewart and Buckner missed time? I mean, they ran the football right through the A-gap. So we'll definitely be keeping an eye on that, because that's the kind of, basically, in a nutshell, you're talking about a top 3 defensive tackle duo. It's very rare that a team gets 2 defensive tackles like that. So you're hoping, honestly, that, tell me if I'm wrong here, but I know that the Colts did some things to change the interior depth, but my goodness, I mean, it does sound a little bit scary to hear Grover Stewart and Neville Gallimore as your starters.
Yeah, for sure. I am not excited about that starting duo. I think you're hoping that you get more from Neville Gallimore than you ended up getting from Taven Bryan and Raekwon Davis. But I think even in the past, I know this was a different regime there on the defensive side of the ball, but the Colts haven't been using those defensive tackles well. Taven Bryan played out of position constantly. I think Adetomiwa Adebawore hasn't been used to any of his strengths so far in his career. So, I mean, you're still trying to figure out, I think, on the defensive side. I know you've got Charlie Partridge returning there as the defensive line coach, so maybe that continues. Maybe they're still playing some guys out of position, and that hasn't quite clicked for them yet. So, yeah, Grover Stewart and Neville Gallimore starting, DeForest Buckner and Tim Smith starting. Really, no matter which one of them, it has to miss time, and we know obviously we're hoping for the best and hoping they're Iron Men and play out the whole season, but they're both defensive tackles pushing 30 who have had some injury history in the past. So, I mean, the NFL is a grueling game and a long season, and it's especially difficult to stay healthy up front. So we know at some point we're probably going to be looking at some mixture of Buckner or Stewart missing a game or two here and there. You just have to feel comfortable with that.
Hey, you know what? I think that if you can keep these guys healthy in tandem, even, I mean, you want 17, but like 13, 14 games.
Yeah.
That's pretty good because last year Buckner missed significant time, and I think the Colts absolutely missed him. This next one still deals with the trenches, but it switches sides of the football, and that is if Ryan Kelly and Will Fry's replacements, Matt Gonsalves and Tanner Bortolini, don't cut it as starters. Now, this one has an asterisk by it because Matt Gonsalves is playing a new position. Yep. Right. He was still a backup last year. Now he got over 500 snaps of experience, so he does get a little bit less of an excuse. Of course, Tanner Bortolini, he already has experience playing center. That's what he's going to be doing. But they are kind of going into their second season, so you can't say that they're, absolutely lost forever if they don't have an electric year. But they're two of the interior pieces of that Colts offensive line, which leans so heavily on the run game and needs to protect the quarterback. So, man, you're hoping they at least are average. But God forbid, if in their sophomore seasons in a league that doesn't have any patience, if they go out there and they allow pressure after pressure, the running game can't get going outside of the outside tackles, or God forbid they get their quarterback sacked a bunch. I don't know, man. I think that you're talking about two very important positions that if it's bad enough, the Colts might not wait.
Yeah, I think it's likely that they do well. I think I've seen enough out of them to assume that they'll probably hold up pretty well there. But I think this conversation needs to be had as people who have not had full-time jobs as starters in the NFL. Gonsalves, who has not taken a ton of snaps at guard. Obviously, the Colts must have liked him as in that transition there to right guard and believe in him and his ability to stay there and start in that spot. And I feel like it's just been this kind of assumption that the Colts offensive line will be good because it's been good. And I think that's probably the case, but this is the first time that they're replacing 2 of their 5 starters. And as good of a unit as you can have up there with Quentin Nelson, Bernard Ryman, Braden Smith, if he's back to what he was, the offensive line's really only as good as its weakest link, because that's the point that you can pinpoint and attack if you're a defensive coordinator and kind of gear your stunts towards that direction and get some matchups that you might like. And especially if it's on the interior, I mean, you can really isolate those guys if you want to. It's not like you can bring in a tight end or a running back to chip on the outside, and you can really make that happen and get some pressure on those guys. So we have to see if they step up. Really as good as your weakest link, even if they're batting 50-50 and one of these guys cuts it and one of them doesn't. If Bortolini ends up being a guy that you like as your starting center of the future, and Gonsalves still isn't what you want over there at right guard, then you really don't have a ton of options to turn to at right guard. If Gonsalves doesn't work out, you're starting a guy like Dalton Tucker, who's been exposed in the past, Danny Pinter, who's definitely been exposed in the past at guard. So even if you've got one spot along that 5 offensive linemen that's a weak point, I think that's going to cause some problems for you.
Yeah, and this is an offense. I mean, every single freaking offense needs an offensive line that is at least competent, right? Mm-hmm. Like you can't be in the NFL anymore with the speed and the athleticism. I mean, these aren't big, fat guys like Vince Wilfork anymore. Like, these are dudes who are incredible athletes, some of the best in the league. Like, look at Myles Garrett. So you can't afford to have bad offensive line play, especially in a running first offense. Yeah. So I love that, Noah. I love that you threw this one in here. We didn't have this one planned, but I do love that you threw this in here. One of the most shocking moves I have seen the Colts recently make was just cutting ties with Matt Gay. And I think we both agree with that. They lean into Spencer Schrader, who had hardly any experience last season.
Yeah.
But what if he can't kick?
Yeah.
I mean, this is maybe the most realistic. This might be the most realistic one.
Yeah.
Because look, man, there is something clearly that they saw behind the scenes, away from games, where whatever fans didn't see, that has them locked in
Yeah.
enough to let go of a former Pro Bowler that, by the way, had over 30 field goals made perfectly from inside 50 yards last year.
Yeah, and I kind of like this headline being down there with our faces above it. If anyone screenshots that it just looks like we're calling Spencer Schrader out. But we're just going for what these possibilities could be. And I think, yeah, when you're dealing with a kicker who's kicked 5 field goals in the NFL, you kind of have to embrace that possibility there that it could not go well for you. And they really don't have a backup plan. I know they've got the undrafted guy. Yeah, that's better fixing it there. They've got that undrafted guy, Maddox Trujillo out of Temple, undrafted rookie. I mean, it's going to be nice to have another camp leg and another, I guess, de facto option if it does turn out Spencer Schrader he just isn't cutting it. I guess you have somebody to turn to, but I think that's also a very real case. Spencer Schrader wins the job. He looks okay in training camp and preseason. We go out there week 1 and it's shaky immediately. I think that could happen. You can't really predict those things when it comes to kickers. Sometimes kickers just wake up and can't do their job, and it's interesting. And you hope that's not the case here with Spencer Schrader. But man, without that big backlog of experience that these other kickers around the league have. I mean, he's made 5 kicks in the NFL. He's kicked 5 field goals. You have to at least consider this as a possibility that might happen throughout the season.
Yeah, and if that is the case, this is an offense that it's not to knock the offense, right? The talent.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to play a lot of close games, though.
For sure.
Okay, they're not the Chiefs, they're not the Bills, they're not the Rams, they're not an offense that's high octane, the Eagles, that are going to go out there and consistently win games by 2 scores or more. Yep. This is a football team that they've got a ground attack that is going to really kind of form the offensive game plan. They've got a new defensive coordinator that is and they rely on that talent defensively a lot. So they're going to be leaning on Spencer Schrader, and we'll see if he's got the clutch gene. That's awesome. But my goodness, if he goes out there and he can't kick, the Colts are going to lose a lot of games. Yeah. So go ahead.
I think you stay optimistic for this as Colts fans, just because I think the Colts have had a pretty good history of evaluating kickers pretty well. For a long time, back to Cody Parkey, Brandon McManus, all these camp legs that they brought in. Spencer Schrader was that before they cut him and moved on because they had Matt Gay on the roster. But they liked him so much that as soon as he was available again, they brought him back, a lot like a guy like Eric Johnson that we mentioned with the defensive tackles. Somebody you had in the building, moved on from, and then are kind of thinking, man, he'd be nice to have around again. And so they went out and grabbed him and liked him enough to move on from Matt Gay. Yeah, I think the Colts obviously believe a ton in what Spencer Schrader can do for them as a starting kicker in the NFL. And until we're proven wrong, I'll tend to side with them.
Yeah. So keep an eye on Spencer Schrader. He's going to be tasked with a lot of responsibility this year. This next one, I think that it might be a little bit difficult to forecast because we are talking about a rookie here.
Yeah.
But given what happened with this position last year, you're expecting it to be better. And what happens if Tyler Warren just looks like and I actually should have put average to below average tight end or below average tight end, but we'll even go with average. Yeah. So obviously Tyler Warren drafted 14th overall. He is going to immediately boost the offense, or so we think. This is the NFL, ladies and gentlemen. Tyler Warren basically has it was a phenomenal season at Penn State, but he has 1 year of great production. Okay, just one where he was literally the entire offense, running, pass catching. He was tasked with a lot of blocking. So you assume he's going to kill it with the Colts, but what happens if, whether it be for a multitude of reasons, quarterback play or just Tyler Warren,
yeah,
like what happens if he doesn't even catch like 38 passes, 39 passes, whatever the whole tight end room had last year. Let's say that he's like he just looks like a guy who isn't a star.
Yeah.
What are you immediately thinking? Are you thinking like he's just a rookie, give him time? But what if the quarterback situation, Noah, is actually on point and Tyler Warren doesn't get open? He's like an average blocker.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, there's a couple different ways you can look at that. I think the optimist, the half or glass half full guy would come in and say, hey, average tight end, he's a rookie. Even an average tight end is better than what the Colts had last year, and that's hard to argue with. I think bare minimum, you're probably going to get an upgrade over what you got in terms of production out of someone like Kylan Granson, Will Mallory last year. If Tyler Warren's the guy taking those snaps, at primarily, I guess, that move tight end kind of guy. And then I guess you can also say, like, if he ends up not having a huge impact as a rookie, why'd you take him first round at 14th overall in a year where you need some instant impact? I think it's fair to question that decision there at that point. Tight ends in the first round historically have not really worked out or given you a ton of production. I know Brock Bowers was the obvious exception to the rule there, but I mean, you're not drafting based off exceptions. If you're sitting there at 14, you're like in week 14, 15 of the season, Tyler Warren really hasn't given you a spark and your offense is still kind of struggling to find some production from the tight end unit. You're kind of looking back at that pick there because you're in a situation with the current regime where, yes, most teams would look at that, hey, first round, give him time. You're in a regime here where we needed instant impact. So if you're not getting the impact, then maybe you're looking back and saying, hey, who else was there that was available around 14 that could have given us a little bit more? Maybe Gonsalves still isn't cutting it at guard, and we could have upgraded there with a guy like Tyler Booker at guard and really made a difference there. There's just a ton of different ways that you could go back and go on if you needed an impact in year one and you're not getting it from Tyler Warren.
Yeah, and there's actually a point here that Patrick makes that I love. His performance, I think, will also be graded against how Colston Loveland does too.
Yeah.
Especially considering how almost everyone had Warren over Loveland in the draft. I will go ahead and say I'm so happy the Colts have Tyler Warren. Yeah. So happy. There's an incredible amount of promise there, and he's a more complete football player at tight end than Colston Loveland. You can do way more with him. But I had Colston Loveland being the Colts' top tight end, and he very well may have been. You don't know.
Yeah.
So if he goes out there and balls out with a guy like Caleb Williams, which, by the way, guys, right now the Bears have a more secure position or like quarterback position than the Colts do, despite 1 year from Williams. I mean, yeah, if Warren not only goes out there and looks rough, but Colston Loveland, him and Cole Kmet just dominate as a duo. I mean, Noah, you're already going to start to see people say that Warren is not cut for the NFL. You're going to see it.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to see. I think that's a little bit unfair if you're trying to judge the Colts based on that. Because Colston Loveland wasn't available when the Colts selected. I think it's a little bit more fair if Tyler Warren's struggling throughout the season to be like, oh, who else could we have gotten? Gray Zabel making an impact, Derek Harmon at defensive tackle, like we brought up. Maybe some of these other guys that could have had a bigger impact if Tyler Warren ends up not being that instant impact that I think. At least in the media room, and you and me personally, I think we assume he will have that impact or a pretty good impact going forward. But I mean, yeah, it's a rookie tight end. It's hard to project these things.
Yeah, and I will say that, that comment from Patrick, it's just how the NFL is, especially when you have such a hole at tight end, and then you had a guy that's as athletic as Loveland, as big of an offensive weapon. We'll just have to kind of keep an eye on that one, but it's all about Tyler Warren at the tight end position, and he pretty much has the door wide open to start. Yeah. So this next one, this guy pissed a lot of Colts fans off last season. Just man, I have my own reservations and praises for this kid. Let's just say there's an incredible amount of talent, and it's A.D. Mitchell. But what if he looks like his rookie year or worse? You're already wide receiver 4 on the depth chart. That's yet to be determined, but it's pretty assumed that Alec Pierce is that wide receiver 3, Downs is 2, Pittman's 1. You want Mitchell to at least elevate, get better, rise up from such a rough year that saw him catch 23 passes. But what if he barely improves? Yeah. The Colts have at least halfway competent QB play. Or, God forbid, Noah, he is even worse, and he's catching like 40% of his passes. I think that would really be kind of a gut punch to the Colts, especially because guys like Reggie Wayne have absolutely vouched for this kid.
Yeah, I mean, young players are super hard to predict in the NFL. I think we all expect him to take a little bit of a leap because based on the talent he has, the potential that everybody thinks he has, and how Reggie Wayne, Michael Pittman, all these guys vouch for him, it's hard to imagine him having a worse year than he did this year. But it's very
Yeah.
possible all of those same issues that he had last year are still there. And he is in the wrong place at the wrong time, and the lights are a little bit too big for him in that sense, and he's not coming down with any contested catches. And I think you can add on top of that, maybe he takes a step back, being focused on all those things and losing some confidence because of those issues that he's been having, that maybe his route running, his separation kind of degrades a little bit too. It's possible. We've seen the best from A.D. Mitchell. I don't think that's the case, but I mean, it's a second-year receiver, and people draft receivers all the time and they end up not working out. Dante Moncrief is a high round draft pick. I think a third round pick for the Colts ended up not working out. In terms of this being a nightmare scenario, I think the Colts are well equipped to handle that. If A.D. Mitchell doesn't give you that production and he doesn't step up, obviously going to be massively disappointing because I know they have huge hopes for him and he's a second round pick. And then you've kind of got this string of second round picks that end up not working out for you. But with Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, Alec Pierce, even Ashton Doolin, Anthony Gould in the room, I think you can make up for a lack of production that you might get from A.D. Mitchell if he ends up busting out this year and it's not what you think it's going to be. I think you're still sitting in an okay spot where that room can still be really productive. But man, that's got to be a huge blow to your morale as a team and your draft strategy and just how things are looking, because with a guy with such high hopes and how much praise he's gotten from the team, if he just ends up throwing out a donut out there every week, then yeah, I think you're getting concerned.
Yeah, and you want as many weapons as you can have in the NFL. It's very simple. But also you want to give your next quarterback as many weapons as you can have, because the more receivers you can throw at a defense, man, it really forces a defense to start stretching its
Yeah.
players. Like you open up more, you open up the field with four wide sets. Obviously the Colts are going to run the ball a crap ton, but that puts a lot of pressure on a defense when you have five, with Tyler Warren, that can really just absolutely make things hectic. So that's going to be. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it affects things probably for the future even more than it would this year. With Alec Pierce on a rookie deal, we talked on Monday about the possibility of if he doesn't have as good of a year, maybe the Colts don't bring him back because they don't want that on the contract. If he has too good of a year, maybe the Colts can't bring him back because they can't justify paying him, Josh Downs, Michael Pittman, all these guys. So yeah, I think that makes things really cloudy for the future because you're not sure what's in store with Alec Pierce. And A.D. Mitchell was drafted all along to kind of fill into that role and provide some competition there and eventually take over if you do end up moving on from Alec Pierce. So if you get in either of those situations where you move on from Alec Pierce next year and A.D. Mitchell doesn't look like the replacement that you drafted him to be, then you could be in a bad situation.
Yeah, and that's something that you're hoping to goodness doesn't happen. The Colts used a second round pick on Mitchell, which is very, 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 very valuable. So this next one, I've actually mentioned this. Noah and I have discussed it. But this is the Colts' arguable top player that we're about to discuss. And I hope I don't get too much flack for this, but this gentleman saw so much usage in college. He's already seen so much usage pretty much every single season he's been a pro, that the wheels, the tread on the tires, it's inevitable at some point. Maybe not soon. You're hoping not soon, but at some point, they're going to start to wear a little thin. And that's what if Jonathan Taylor hits that this season and starts falling off. This might be the most backbreaking one because – yeah, we'll get to one that might be, right? But this is your offensive engine. This is like the transmission in your car. Okay, if that goes out or your alternator, you're screwed. The car's just not going to run. And like an alternator, it's a small piece to a big vehicle. Jonathan Taylor is one player on a team that's going to have 53 guys. But he's arguably, and I don't even know if it's close, man. He's the engine of that offense. If he starts to show regression, he has sustained injuries. He got used so much last season. He carried ball over 20 times a game. What do you think happens to this offense? Even if, let's just say, Daniel Jones or Anthony Richardson, they go out there and they are phenomenal. But Jonathan Taylor hits that regression stride. What are you thinking, man?
Yeah, I think regardless of how Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones playing, if they're playing really well, no matter how well they're playing, this is not going to be an offense that the strength is the passing attack. It's never going to be that. Yeah, so I think you're leaning on Jonathan Taylor, and I think you're leaning on him really heavily. You like the additions that you brought in with Khalil Herbert and DJ Giddens to kind of take some of that wear and tear off of him throughout the season, because you're a little bit worried about that based on the injury history. But man, if Jonathan Taylor goes down and you're still a primarily running offense, I really don't love Khalil Herbert and DJ Giddens as your running back 1 and 2, as much as I like them as your running back 2 and 3. I don't think either of them are ready to step into that role and really take advantage of the kind of the lanes that the offensive line has given Jonathan Taylor in the past, and the way that Jonathan Taylor's been able to take advantage of those. I don't think either of those guys really have the burst to make things happen and run that offense so efficiently. So, yeah, I don't know about you, Drake. I don't know about any of our listeners, but I've been playing quite a bit of College Football 26, doing some Road to Glory with a running back. They've got this system in there about wear and tear, where if you take too many hits, your career's just over. I got 3 years in with my Road to Glory running back, and he took too much damage, and I had to medically retire. So, and I was just comparing. I'm like, I didn't even get as many carries as Jonathan Taylor did in college. So, Jonathan Taylor's the guy who got a huge workload in college, and that's continued to ramp up throughout the NFL. Really last year, especially at the end of the season, where he's getting around 25 carries a game, and I mean, we mentioned that with kicker. It's sometimes you just wake up and they're not kicking well, and it's hard to predict things with young players. I think just as much so, it's hard to predict when a running back's just gonna have taken too much of too much damage throughout his career and taken too much of a beating, and really can't play as effectively, and those injuries start to pile up. We really hope that's not the case with Jonathan Taylor. He's so explosive, so fun to watch, and he just seems like one of those freak superhuman athletes that can recover from all these injuries faster and just be out there on the field forever. But I mean, it comes for everybody. Time is undefeated. Injuries are 100% in the NFL, and it's going to happen at some point. You just hope it's not this year.
Yeah, and you look at his age and you're like, hey, he's only 26, okay? But, I mean, he's missed a combined 13 games in 22 and 2023. Then he missed 3 last season. So you've missed 16 in your last 3 years. Also, he has 1,228 carries in 61 starts, which equates out to 20 plus carries a game for his career. And, it's just a lot. That's so much usage. And at Wisconsin, he averaged even more than that. And so people will look back to that 2021 season with Carson Wentz. But Jonathan Taylor was the entire offense, and he played 17 games. He saw the most usage of his career then, and he's still been playing. Still wrong. He averaged just under 20 yards or 20 carries a game. This season, he played 14 games and had 303 carries. And the last 5 games, he averaged 28 carries a game. That's just insane. So you're just hoping that he's got an insane amount of tread left on those tires, because his age does not reflect, Noah, just how old this guy is on the field.
For sure. Yeah, and that's something you're always going to be worried about. And if those wheels fall off, really, this season, you're wondering where you go from there and how you kind of steer the offense, because I don't think you're going to drive it. I see Patrick in the comments mentioning JT stepping in for Marlon Mack after that injury. I don't think you have that guy. DJ Giddens, as much as
Absolutely
the Colts like
not.
him, you don't have a guy like Jonathan Taylor who can step in and fill that void. So, yeah, I think you'd just be missing something. You still wouldn't have that passing game that you'd be able to rely on, regardless of how highly you value these wide receivers. I mean, just the quarterbacks on the roster in the history of their NFL careers combined, I mean, they just don't have that history of being part of a prolific passing offense. So, yeah, I think it's something you're really worried about. I think if from the outside looking in, you're looking at this roster, you're feeling good because you see Jonathan Taylor on there. But we know any moment a running back can be taken out of the lineup. So you're worried about that for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, the NFL is absolutely nothing like pro basketball, baseball, probably even hockey, golf, NASCAR. None of that is the overnight cliff that just you're like one day you're like, wow, great. Very brief example. I always go back to 2014 Peyton Manning throwing 30 plus touchdowns for the Broncos. And then 2015 Peyton
Yep.
Manning had 9 touchdown passes and 17 interceptions. So it just happens overnight where these players are just, it's gone. It's just completely gone, and the league figures them out. So we'll definitely have to keep an eye on that. I still think Jonathan Taylor is going to be the focal point. I think he'll be fine.
Yeah.
Until he actually does it, I have the utmost confidence in him, because even when he was injured in 22 and 23, he still averaged like 74, 78 yards a game. So this next one, brand new guy is brought in to change a culture on one side of the ball. You had 3 years of mediocre play, relaxed play, static approaches. So you bring in Mr. What do they call him? The mad scientist, which, by the way, he hates that. So I'm sure that he'll let us know that at training camp. But what happens if Lou Anarumo's defense just falls absolutely flat? Now, there has to be a little bit of context put here. You've got different players that he wasn't a part of when they were drafted. You've got new guys like Charvarius Ward and Cam Bynum. Luckily, he probably had a say in those. But you still have a new scheme, and these guys have been used to the same one for 3 years. And even guys like Ward and Bynum, they played in completely different schemes than Anarumo's. So they're coming to a brand new team and learning a new scheme. Yeah. Now, this can be the case with any NFL team, right? But for the Colts, there's a lot at stake here, because there's going to be growing pains. But my question is, what happens if those growing pains, it's like week 5, still averaging like 28 points let up a game. Week 9, you still haven't figured it out. The pressure isn't there. The coverage is crap. You're talking week 18, and you look back already and you're like, this defense might not be it.
Yeah. I mean, it's possible what we saw from Lou Anarumo and the Bengals defense last year is kind of what we might see as he transitions this year to the Indianapolis Colts. I mean, you obviously don't assume that. The long history that Lou Anarumo's had in the league and the success he's had with the Bengals prior to this past season, you kind of expect him to fall back onto his old ways there. But yeah, I mean, the NFL is kind of what have you done for me lately, and you kind of are what your record says you are, what your results say you are. And at this point, despite his long and illustrious career before last season, that's the thing everybody remembers about Lou Anarumo right now is that terrible Bengals defense that he had last year and that he orchestrated last year. And I mean, there's a ton of excuses you can give for why they're not performing well. They're leaning on these young guys too much. But hey, the Colts have young guys in some prominent roles also. If Jalen Jones, or I guess if you're considering this a position battle between Jalen Jones and Justin Wally, at least one of those corners on the outside is going to be a really young guy. Nick Cross, still a really young guy. Jalen Carlisle's former 5th-round pick, you're going to be relying on pretty heavily. Laiatu Latu at defensive end, everyone expects to play a prominent role. These are young guys in prominent roles on the Colts defense that you have to rely on. So you can't just shake your head at the fact that, hey, the Bengals had some young players on the defensive side of the ball, and that's why it didn't work with Lou Anarumo. Hey, you're going to have that with every NFL team, and the Colts certainly have that here. So you can't assume that it's going to work, and he's going to come out and be the mad scientist that everybody calls him and be this Patrick Mahomes stopper. It's very possible that some of these quarterbacks just come in and walk all over that defense like they have in the past with Gus Bradley's unit.
Yeah, and the biggest thing about Anarumo is he can at least lean. I mean, there's no excuse in the NFL for sucking. I mean, outside of maybe you don't have the talent, right? Yeah. But Anarumo didn't have much of just that in his last couple seasons in Cincinnati. It was literally the Trey Hendrickson show. So keep an eye on his defense. I personally think that I'm not saying that I expect them to just be top 10.
Yeah,
but I do think they're going to at least improve. Okay, because Gus Bradley is just the most boring coordinator you're going to find. Great guy, legendary defensive, I guess, mind of the past. But man, that dude just so easy to approach. Yeah. This next one has to do with a guy that Anarumo loves, brings him up without even being prompted in conversation, and that's Laiatu Latu. Now, what if he doesn't elevate? Articles, analysts, us, we've all kind of said, hey, the Colts are really looking at Latu like this is the year where it's early, but this is when we need to see you really take that next step. You're a 15th overall pick. Yeah. Your first player taken in the 2024 NFL draft that's on the defensive side. The expectations are high. Now, what if
Yeah.
he just kind of has like another pedestrian year, maybe 4 to 5 sacks. The pressures are kind of he's still a little bit of a liability in the in the running game. What are your thoughts? Because then Kwity Paye's fifth-year option looks pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, this is a group that needs a standout guy. You've got Kwity Paye, who's a solid defensive end. Tyquan Lewis has been a solid rotational piece for you. Samson Ebukam's been a solid rotational piece throughout his career, and he's coming off an injury, so that's kind of a big question mark there. Isaiah Land hasn't really proven anything in the NFL to this point. You need a dog in the room, and that's got to be Latu. I think all signs kind of point to him, and everybody just kind of assumes, I think you hit it on the head there, that he's going to elevate his game to the next level and kind of be that guy who provides the most pressure on the defense. Very possible that doesn't happen. We're talking a lot about, in this episode at least, about these second-year players, these young players, and trying to predict what they're going to do and if they're going to take that next year jump. I mean, progression in the NFL isn't always linear. You're not always going to see that next stair step every year when you're going to see these young players progress. So, yeah, I mean, I think, a lot like all of these situations, I think you and I are both kind of leaning on the optimistic side of these things. And I guess that's why this is nightmare scenarios, because we're kind of considering the tail side of all of these coin flips. So yeah, I think we're assuming that he's going to take that step up, but it's very possible that he doesn't. And then you're left with kind of a room of solid contributors and nobody really you're really game planning against on the offensive side.
Yeah, you need Latu you need him to step up. You really do. I know that, last season the expectations were a little more, but he's got to do it. He was supposed to be the most polished defensive edge in that draft. So this next one, still with the defensive side of the football, this is a guy that was arguably one of the biggest free agent signings of the offseason. Definitely the biggest one for the Colts. That's former second-team All-Pro Charvarius Ward from the San Francisco 49ers. Now, he will be tailing every team's top guy. He is in a defense where he gets to play a lot of press coverage. He's going to play more man, still some zone, but he'll be tasked with a lot. Now, what if Charvarius Ward, though, looks like his 2024 version? Obviously, he was dealing with some off-the-field tragedies, okay? Stuff that can really make it difficult to live daily life, let alone play in the NFL. But still, you go from leading the league with 23 pass defenses to having 7 to missing 5 games. You weren't as prolific with your interceptions, weren't even able to get 1. That had only happened one other time in his career out of 7 seasons. So this guy, people are looking at him like, we've said it. As soon as he was signed, that entire cornerback room, not only were they elevated, but every single slot took a step back so that Charvarius Ward was the number one guy.
Yeah.
What if this happens? You've already got a question marks like, can Sam Womack do what he did? Can Kenny Moore keep it up? He's been in the league like 8 years. What if Jalen Jones looks like there's a lot of questions about that room, even though it's talented.
Yeah.
But man, that's the biggest letdown. If Charvarius Ward looks like himself from last year on the field.
Yeah. Yeah. If Charvarius Ward doesn't look like what you signed him and what you're paying him to be, the biggest outside free agent in the franchise's history, then you are in that situation where you were last year, where you had Jalen Jones, Sam Womack, these guys playing outside corner, and it just wasn't good enough, and that's why the defensive back room was so revamped this offseason. I think Charvarius Ward's situation here, obviously a lot of different circumstances based on what he was dealing with, but kind of similar to Lou Anarumo's situation, where he has some really good experience and a really good resume in the past, but his most recent year did not look very good. And you just kind of hope that, hey, that was the anomaly, and he is actually what he was in 2023 and before that. So it's hard to predict that. Also, 29-year-old cornerback, sometimes play falls off for these guys who are getting up there towards 30, and it just doesn't come back all the way, whether it's just a little bit less athleticism, a little bit less durable in terms of their availability. There's just a lot of reasons that can go into just a little bit of a downgrade in your play. And really at that position, which is the second hardest position to play in the NFL, I feel like really any kind of hindrance you have with your athleticism, any kind of downgrade you have with your athleticism can change things drastically for how you play and your effectiveness on the outside, especially if you're line up against the number one receiver on every offense that you're going against, like they've said he's going to be.
Yeah, he's going to have an incredible amount of responsibility. He's got a lot riding on his shoulders, and the defense has a lot that they've put on his shoulders. So Charvarius Ward he's going to need to have a great season. So this next one is utterly situational. Okay, and it's one guy, a question for one guy if another guy actually starts, and that's what if Alec Pierce doesn't fit Daniel Jones if Daniel Jones starts. Now, this one I thought of kind of on the fly because you've got A.D. Mitchell still. He was initially brought in for the sole purpose, maybe not sole purpose, but for a purpose to push Alec Pierce. And I guess the Colts didn't see the writing on the wall. Like, dude's a deep threat. You didn't have a deep passing quarterback to throw him the football. No wonder he didn't blow up in those first two seasons. But what if Daniel Jones starts? Daniel Jones, he does have an arm capable of making a guy like Alec Pierce shine, but it's nothing like Richardson's.
Yeah.
And Joe Flacco could be 50 in the NFL. Probably still have a top 10 arm as far as strength.
Yeah.
So Jones likes those safer passes. He likes those shorter routes. He likes those intermediate passes. What happens to Alec Pierce, do you think, if he's in a contract season?
Yeah. It's possible. I think those numbers that he put up last year are hard to duplicate when you lead the NFL in average yards per reception. And it's kind of a guy who kind of fed off of this boomer bust type of situation. Hey, it's not super high percentage passes that you're getting when you're down there deep. And really, most of your production is coming from those low percentage passes. So it's possible that he doesn't get as many of those. He doesn't convert as many of those. And those numbers just kind of fall off a cliff is what it looks like, even though he's essentially doing the same kind of things that he did last season. Daniel Jones, I think this is interesting. I was listening to the Athletic Football Show, and Derek Klassen, kind of their quarterback guru over there, going over, I guess, some tier rankings for quarterbacks and kind of basing them kind of how often they take risks and how safe they are. And Daniel Jones was in that tier of the safest quarterbacks in the league right now, along there with Aaron Rodgers and those kind of guys. And he even mentioned on there that, hey, like his rookie year, when he came into the league, was kind of around the middle of the pack and willing to take some more risks. But as his career has gone on, he's like consistently, like as the years go on, making less and less of those deep ball decisions and those intermediate decisions, and he's taking those check downs earlier and he's throwing it away more often. And that maybe is good for a guy like Josh Downs or Michael Pittman on your roster, Tyler Warren on your roster. But yeah, I think you hit it right here. Alec Pierce, I think, is the one kind of guy who doesn't fit if that ends up being the case, and Daniel Jones has taken most of those snaps. So yeah, very likely situation where we just see those numbers fall off, and it's not at the fault of Alec Pierce. Maybe you just, that coin flip on those contested catches, maybe he loses one or two more of those than he did last season, and he's just getting a lot less of them. So, yeah, very possible that we see this situation where Alec Pierce is not the threat that he was last year.
Yeah, and, I've mentioned that to become a bigger threat, he'd need to be more. But like Noah mentioned in one of our more recent episodes, it might have been the last one on Monday, he probably is who he is. Right? Like he's that dude who's going to absolutely roast you deep. But if you need him to get open short, intermediate, on a really complex route, he's probably not going to do it. You know what I mean? Like he's a lanky guy who can sky up. His brother plays college basketball for Princeton. So, this is an athletic family that he's from. So Alec Pierce is a freak when it comes to a deep ball. But if Daniel Jones can't get him the football, it's going to look a lot like Gardner Minshew when Gardner Minshew was starting and Pierce just really wasn't too much of a factor. So this next one, these last two are probably going to take up the rest of our episode. This is probably, it would be the worst of this entire list, because you put a football team together to succeed. You put a football team together, even if it's going to be a rough year and that you're rebuilding, you don't want to lose, right? Like you don't want to lose a crap ton of games, unless it's like, week 14 and that you've got that number one pick. Maybe if you lose, I'm kidding, of course. But it's if the Colts finish with a losing record and no playoffs, okay, this is potentially it changes the immediate future for the Indianapolis Colts. We had to put this on here. Guys like Chris Ballard going into year 9, he's done. Guys like Shane Steichen, probably gone. Maybe even Lou Anarumo is removed immediately if the defense is a part of this. This is a team that is now under new ownership, of course, due to awful circumstances with Jim Irsay's passing. But, Carly Irsay-Gordon, I think it's Casey Foyt, Kalen Jackson, they're all incredibly capable of running this team. But they're kind of walking into a situation where it's like, hey, guys, we're new here. We've been here forever, but we're new as owners, but got to go win. Like, that's the situation the Colts are in. There's just so much on the line that they get a winning record, better than 9-8, by the way, and they absolutely have to make the playoffs.
Yeah, we mentioned that thing about Spencer Schrader. Maybe that's the most plausible. I disagree. I think this one, now that this one's come up, I think this is probably the most plausible one that we see here. And like we mentioned at the top of the show, maybe this is definitely a nightmare scenario for the Colts as an organization, as a team, but maybe for Colts fans, this is kind of what they're expecting and hoping for to play out, just to see some change come with this new ownership. So yeah, I mean, 8-9, very possible, very, very possible that you see this team go 8-9, 7-10, and miss the playoffs, and then make some changes happen there. But yeah, I mean, I think we went over 8 things on this list that could make that even more likely. Like, all of these things I think can add up because, man, everything that we went over on the list, that's like a 50-50 shot of happening. This one's like you just combine everything, and the odds of one of those things going wrong and making this team go to a losing record, I think, just goes up. I think there's so many things that have to go right here for the Colts, just because I know the roster's really good. I think it's maybe shallow in a little bit of places, but just based off of the talent that you have at quarterback right now, you need so many things to go right for you to have a winning season and get into the playoffs, that if one or two of these things that we mentioned goes wrong, then you're really teetering on the edge here, and that's going to cause some real change with the Colts.
Yeah, and, this franchise has gone through the ringer, okay? You have Andrew Luck retire, and this is after making the playoffs, and then just all hell breaks loose because the roster was built for him the offense especially was built for him to run it. And then you got things like, Shaq Leonard, he can't play anymore. And you got things like, the current state of affairs where you brought in this quarterback and you can't figure it out yet. And it's almost clear that he's not fit to start in the NFL. Yeah. Jim Irsay passes away. Just this franchise has been through an assload of adversity. Okay. And I know that Chris Ballard's been blamed for a lot. The quarterback situation's been blamed for a lot. Hell, even Andrew Luck, when he retired, people were burning his jersey. So this is a fan base that's just, they're sick of not being in the playoffs. And even when you did it with Rivers, you still had a first round exit. Man, who do you think, because I kind of mentioned it, but who do you think is done? Like, I'm talking from the prominent names from the front office all the way down to the coaching staff. Throw out some names. This is darkest scenario shit. Yeah. Okay, people. So we got to say this. Who do you think is done?
I mean, I don't think you can say anyone is safe. I think Chris Ballard's probably on the hottest seat, but I think when you've got the guy at the top on the hottest seat, that makes it just less and less likely that anyone under him is going to stay. Right. So yeah, Chris Ballard gone. If you think, hey, Chris Ballard's gone, so that probably means you move on from Shane Steichen too. You fired the head coach. You should probably also fire the offensive defensive coordinators. So you probably move on from a guy like Lou Anarumo too. It just goes from the top down. I would say if you had another scapegoat to take things out on, you could do that. But I think the Colts have kind of used that up. Where they've fired their head coaches, they've fired their offensive coordinators, they've fired their defensive coordinators. There's really only one change left that you can make if you're still not getting the results, and that's the head honcho there, and Chris Ballard at GM. And once you make that move, I don't think anybody can be safe.
Yeah. Now this last one is probably tied directly to if this happens, and it deals with the quarterbacks. I saved it for last because it's probably going to take the most time to discuss. I mean, we have about 6 minutes left, but we're going to need every second of that. And that's if Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones aren't franchise guys. And we're not necessarily saying they need to go out there and be, 5-star Michelin chef, exquisite under center, right? Like, if they can even be serviceable in this offense, you probably have a playoff team. Okay. But what if they just suck? Like, what if
Yeah.
both of them, Richardson wins the gig, loses it, gets injured. Jones goes out there, looks like crap, reverse it. Jones gets benched week 4 because you're 0-3. Richardson goes out there, completes less than 50% of his passes, throws more picks than touchdowns. I mean, this is the worst,
Yeah.
in my opinion, because the one we just mentioned about making the playoffs and a losing record, it's not going to be Riley Leonard that's going to get you there. Okay. It's going to be one of these two guys. And if they both can't make it happen, I mean, Noah, you're pretty much looking at dead men walking when
Yeah.
it comes to keeping your job in Indy.
Yeah, that's dead men walking when it comes to Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones, and I think that extends dead men walking when you're looking at the coaching staff in the front office, like we mentioned before. You really have to get this position right because you haven't for the last 9 years. It just hasn't been right since Andrew Luck left. There's maybe been a year here and there, like you mentioned, with Phillip Rivers, where you're like feeling a little bit okay, but you haven't had a long-term solution. You went for broke, going with the 4th overall pick and Anthony Richardson, trying to find that long-term solution. If it doesn't work this year, then it's not going to work. Honestly, this probably worst case scenario, also kind of likely, but I think the real worst case scenario is actually thrown out here by Patrick in the chat. It was very early in the episode, so I'm probably not going to be able to find it scrolling up. If you guys are watching on Facebook, on X, you're listening to the audio version later after we do this live show. First of all, thank you, but also jump in here in the chat and YouTube when we're doing this live, because there's like a second podcast going on in the chat. Listening to Tony, Patrick, Tracy, these people chop it up in the comments. So yeah, get in here. But yeah, I think that you, Pat or Drake, you found that one about Anthony Richardson. The real nightmare scenario is them not making a decision on Anthony Richardson. I think even if you come out of this year saying, hey, he wasn't the guy, Daniel Jones wasn't the guy, at least you have some closure and you can move on. I think that real nightmare scenario is, hey, Anthony Richardson goes out there, he wins the week 1 starting job, he looks great for 3 weeks, he looks really terrible for 2 weeks, and then he gets injured for the rest of the season, and you're like, now what do we do? I think that's the real nightmare scenario, where you're going into whatever year that is, if you end up holding on to this staff and this coaching staff, this front office, and you're going in there and you're like, okay, what do we do with Anthony Richardson? You probably have to run it back for another year. It's probably not going to be Daniel Jones, but you're going to get someone probably at that same kind of level as Daniel Jones, a free agent 1-year rental that can be an insurance option while you still try to work out if Anthony Richardson's the guy or not. Obviously, I don't think you can let that happen if you're the Ursays in your new ownership. You can't let that bleed over into the second year of your ownership. If you see that go wrong and you see those injuries for Anthony Richardson pile up again and some inconsistent performances, I think you just have to make a decision, even if you don't have a ton of information to work on. Because I think you probably do have enough information based off of these first 3 years where you can make a decision. Maybe you won't feel good about it and you might be feeling like you're leaving something on the table, but you have to pick one way or the other.
Yeah, this would be. I like that you referenced this, because even if it's yes, even if it's no, okay, you at least have a clear answer,
Yeah.
and you know where you're going next. Man, if this happens and you're still sitting there, saying, well, what if he does stay healthy in year 5 or in year 4?
Yeah.
It's like you're really, really rolling the dice. You're already rolling the dice. But and I think once you get to it, if Jones also isn't the guy, so both of these guys also have their futures on the line, and they each need to win this and then thrive, because Richardson, he's got a better go of it than Jones if he doesn't work out, because like we've said on the show many times, and it's fair, there are going to be teams that are going to say, we can figure that out.
Yeah.
We can untap that ridiculous potential. Jones is done, dude. He got cut, or he got released by the Giants. He was, by all regards, the 3rd quarterback on the depth chart for the Vikings, or I don't even know if he was on the roster.
Yeah.
So, if he can't make it happen, especially after the Colts guaranteed this man $13.5 million, he's done. So, I mean, it's nothing against Riley Leonard, ladies and gentlemen. I know there's fans out there that say, he could run the offense. let's just not even.
If
We're
he
not
went
even gonna
to
talk
if he
about
went to Nevada, people wouldn't say that.
yeah, but like it's critical that they get an answer here, even if the Colts don't, have one of these guys pan
Yeah.
out. I think that I love what Patrick said. Yeah, that might actually be the biggest nightmare scenario is that if all of a sudden you're asking yourself, well, what if we can still do something with Richardson and
Yeah.
he plays like 5 games? But that's our show, guys. Thank you so much for getting in here with us. I know that we started a little bit late, but we greatly appreciate it. Don't forget to like the Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook and follow Indianapolis Colts on SI and on X. We are at Colts on_SI. Subscribe to the Horseshoe Huddle on YouTube and click the bell to turn on notifications. Want to listen to the Horseshoe Huddle podcast? Well, there's no problem with that. You subscribe to us on Apple, subscribe to us on Spotify. We are everywhere, anywhere that you can listen to podcasts. So, guys, we will be seeing you again on Monday. Training camp starts next week. I myself will be at training camp. I'm still hashing out when, but yeah, Indianapolis Colts on SI is definitely going to be covering it. So keep yourselves tuned into what we're doing. But guys, until then, enjoy your Thursday, enjoy your Friday, have a wonderful weekend, and we will be seeing you all again on Monday night. Take care.